You know that old saying, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's like the first rule of investing, diversification. And it's solid advice. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the really big risks, the scary ones, are the kind that can smash every single basket you have, all at the same time? So let me just ask you straight up. Do you think a really well-diversified portfolio is basically invincible? It's easy to think so, but the truth, well, it's a little more complicated than that. Because here's the thing, spreading your eggs across a bunch of baskets is smart, no doubt. But what happens if the floor gives out from under you? In finance, that's the kind of risk we're talking about. The kind that doesn't care about your clever stock picks. It's the risk that hits the entire system. Okay, so let's get into it. To really wrap our heads around how finance deals with this, we first need to understand that risk really comes in two main flavors. So on one hand, you've got what's called diversifiable risk. This is the stuff you can manage. The risk that one specific company goes belly up or a single industry has a bad year. You can spread your bets to protect yourself. But on the other hand, you have systematic risk. This is the big one. It's like a market-wide tidal wave that can swamp every boat in the harbor, no matter how well built it is. So let's zoom in on this systematic risk, this thing that you can't just diversify away. What is it, really? Well, the textbook definition is pretty clear. It's risk that hits the whole financial system, and you just can't get rid of it by spreading your investments around. Think of it like this. It's the price of admission you pay just for being in the market in the first place. And this isn't just some abstract concept. We're talking about real-world events. Things like major economic recessions, sudden changes in interest rates by the central bank, or inflation that gets out of control. These things hit everybody. It can even be something like longevity risk, an entire industry of annuity providers being at risk simply because, on average, people are living longer than anyone expected. All right, so if we can't eliminate these huge risks, the next logical question is, can we at least measure them? We need to know just how bad things could get in a true worst-case scenario. This is what finance pros call tail risk. Now, a really common tool for this is something called value at risk, or VAR. You can think of it as drawing a line in the sand. It tries to answer the question, with 99% confidence, what's the most money we could possibly lose on any given day? It gives you a number, a boundary for your normal, everyday losses. But, and this is a huge but, what about that other 1%? What happens on that one day out of 100 when all hell breaks loose? VAR tells you where the cliff edge is, but it tells you absolutely nothing about how far the drop is. And that's exactly where our next tool, Tail Value at Risk, or TVR, comes into play. TVR answers the question that VAR can't. It looks beyond that cliff edge and asks, okay, we've done over. Now what's the average damage we can expect? It quantifies the pain in that worst-case tail. So let's just put it side by side to make it super clear. VAR asks, how bad can things get most of the time? It sets a limit. TVAR asks a much more useful question for a crisis. Okay, once things get really bad, what's our average loss going to look like? That's the number you need to know to actually prepare for a disaster. So, we've identified systematic risk, and we've learned how to measure the really nasty parts of it. Now for the final piece of the puzzle, actively managing it. And one of the most important tools for doing this is a financial contract called a swap. And trust me, these are a huge deal. We're talking about a market with a value in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. At its core, a swap is actually pretty simple. It's just a deal. Two parties agree to exchange, or swap, different kinds of future payments with each other. They're basically just trading their financial risks so that each one ends up with a risk they're more comfortable holding. A classic interest rate swap makes this really easy to understand. Imagine you have a loan with a floating interest rate, and you're worried rates are going to go up. Meanwhile, there's another company out there that has a fixed rate loan, but they think rates are going to fall. You can make a deal. You agreed to pay them a fixed rate payment, and in return, they agreed to pay your floating rate payment. You've literally swapped your risks. Now you have the predictable fixed rate you wanted, and they get the exposure to falling rates that they wanted. Everybody wins. Okay, let's zoom back out. We've talked about some pretty complex stuff here. Let's connect the dots and see why these tools are so incredibly important for the whole economy. So let's just do a quick recap. What's the bottom line? First, diversification is great, but it has its limits. It just can't protect you from market-wide systematic risk. Second, to understand that risk, you need a tool like TVAR that actually tells you what the damage could look like in a real crisis. And finally, financial instruments like swaps are the machinery that lets big institutions trade these massive risks, moving them to whoever is best able to handle them. These aren't just tricks, they're essential for the stability of the whole system. Which leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. We've built these incredibly powerful, incredibly sophisticated tools to measure and trade risk around the globe. But has all this financial engineering actually made our system safer? Or have we just created a system that's more complex and intertwined in ways that maybe we don't fully understand? It's something we're thinking about.